Hi, I'm John, and this is my review of the Specialized Diverge. This one here is the 2018 Comp Carbon model, but in this review I'll be talking about the Diverge line more generally. Later in the video though, I will talk about some of the specific details about this particular bike, and if you have any questions or comments as we go, feel free to note them down below. The 2018 and 2019 Diverge are the second generation of the line from Specialized. The first generation Diverge was like an extra versatile endurance road bike. But this latest version has an updated frame geometry and the addition of the Future Shock, bringing it more into the realm of gravel bikes. So is the Diverge a worthwhile bike? Do we even need another category of bike for a very specific type of riding? It's easy to look at bikes like the Diverge or other gravel, adventure, all-road bikes, whatever you want to call them, as a marketing exercise to take advantage of a passing fad. But I think the truth is actually quite the opposite. I think the Diverge is the kind of bike that will stay with me for a long time, because it's done something that a lot of other incredible bikes haven't been able to do, and that's to bring back just the simple and pure enjoyment of riding a bike that I had as a kid. I've had high-end road bikes and high-end mountain bikes, most recently a Trek Madone and a Santa Cruz Blur. I've also had commuter bikes that I used to get around campus when I was in school. But none of these bikes were really well suited to just heading out the door and going for a nice long ride. My road bike was fast and light. It was awesome, as long as I was on smooth roads or bike paths. As soon as the road surface got loose or bumpy though, it was no longer enjoyable to ride. Here in Michigan, most of our roads make for a pretty uncomfortable experience on a traditional road bike. And it was terrible for riding in an urban environment because the hunched over aero position made it uncomfortable to keep my head up so that I could safely see my surroundings. A mountain bike is obviously the right tool for the job when you're on the trails, but the suspension, knobby tires, and low gearing make for an inefficient ride if you're mostly on smooth surfaces. And where I live, I don't have quick access to trails around my house. If I want a mountain bike, I need to pack up my bike on the car and go drive somewhere. There's a spectrum of riding that ranges from perfectly smooth roads on one end to gnarly off-road trails on the other. And dedicated mountain bikes and road bikes are at their best at those far ends of the spectrum. But there's a lot of great riding to be enjoyed in the middle of the spectrum, in the kind of conditions that exist all around us. Bike paths, park trails, sidewalks, rural roads, these are the kinds of places where the Diverge is at home. It's fast and comfortable on the road. It may not be as light and as fast as my road bike was, but that's not something I've ever noticed. What I do notice is how much more comfortable I am, both due to the great frame geometry and the comfortable ride quality provided by the wider tires, the Future Shock, and the CGR seat post. Let's talk about the Future Shock. You get 20mm, less than an inch of suspension travel. It uses a progressive spring system that is plush for small bump compliance, but ramps up so that you don't bottom it out when going over larger bumps. The bike comes with 3 springs, so you can either make it firmer or softer to fit your preference. I've been riding mine with the medium spring that came installed. The idea behind the Future Shock is that it's able to provide suspension to your upper body without any of the detrimental power loss you experience with conventional suspension. The effect of the Future Shock is subtle, and it feels more like the type of ride you get from large, soft tires. The benefit, though, is that you can achieve this kind of comfortable ride independent of your tire pressure settings. So when you're setting your tire pressure, you can just focus on the optimum pressure for traction and rolling resistance, and then let the Future Shock handle the comfort. I think it's easy to underestimate the effect of the Future Shock because it works so transparently. But if you watch it in action, you can see how much it's doing to help smooth out the ride. On smooth pavement, it's doing very little. On a dirt road or crushed gravel path, you can see it absorbing the high-frequency small vibrations that would otherwise have made it into your hands and your arms. It's the simplicity and lack of damping in the Future Shock that allows it to be so reactive to this kind of surface. If it's not clear already, the Future Shock is not a mountain bike suspension. The limited travel and lack of damping means that it's not equipped to handle large hits or drops. But the Diverge is a blast on smooth single track, and the Future Shock does a good job even in this kind of environment. The progressive spring is able to cope with the small rocks and roots that you encounter on this kind of trail. The Diverge is not a replacement for a full-fledged mountain bike, but the Future Shock, rugged build quality, comfortable riding position, and the strong, reliable brakes make it perfectly capable on these kinds of trails. The biggest variable is having the right tire. The stock 38mm Trigger Pros that come on the bike are a great all-around tire, but they lack traction as soon as the trail gets a little bit loose. At its core, the Diverge is a road bike. It's quick, responsive, and efficient. It lets you ride fast and far. It feels more on the high-performance end of the gravel bike spectrum, but it has real off-road capabilities that give it an incredible amount of versatility. Anywhere your ride takes you, the Diverge will likely be a good tool for the job. In this sense, the Diverge is even less of a niche bike than a traditional road or mountain bike. It's happy to go anywhere you point it and let you focus on enjoying the ride. And for me, that's the essence of enjoying riding a bike. It's being able to hop on a bike and just ride wherever you feel like going. So now I want to talk about some of the details and specifics of my particular bike. This one's a size 56 and it weighs 21 pounds without pedals and accessories. I've left the bike stock so far and have only added a small Specialized seat bag, a Night Rider light set, a Lezyne GPS, and a spur cycle belt. This model has the Shimano RS505 shifters and brake levers, Shimano 105 derailleurs, and a Praxis Alba crankset with a press-fit BB386 bottom bracket. So far I've been happy with the performance of all the components. The brakes have good power and modulation, and I haven't had any issues with rubbing in all the time that I've had the bike. And as you'd expect from Shimano, the shifters and derailleurs work really well. I really like the updated 105 front derailleur, which has a revised linkage compared to the old one. It's more compact and has better leverage, so you get a much easier actuation than the prior version of this derailleur. I'm really interested to try out the new Ultegra RX rear derailleur when that becomes available, so stay tuned for a video about that. The Praxis cranks feel stiff and they shift really well. Despite the popularity of 1x setups for gravel bikes, I do like the drivetrain on this bike and I think the 2x setup is appropriate for how I'm using it. Usually there's not much to say about the other finishing parts on a bike, but that's not the case here. The stock seat post is the S-Works CGR, which basically works like a carbon leaf spring to add some compliance to the seat. It's not as noticeable as the Future Shock, but it definitely helps to take the edge off. The CGR post has a 25mm setback, which is more than seat posts that come on other Diverge models. It's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, it just depends on how the bike fits you, so it's something to be aware of. The other stock item that I really like is the hover bar. This handlebar has 15mm rise, and it's extremely comfortable. The tops of the bars have an ergonomic flat surface, and there's a short reach to the hoods and then a compact curve down to the drops. I tend to ride on the hoods, but all the positions are comfortable. One issue with the hover bar is that the rise leaves little room for handlebar mounted accessories. It was a bit of a challenge to find room to fit everything on my bar. All carbon models, other than the S-Works, use the same FACT 9R carbon frame. The frame geometries are also shared between all models, including the aluminum versions. The frame geometry is comfortably upright for a performance bike. Your riding position can also be adjusted by raising or lowering the stem, as well as flipping the stem to change its angle. And unlike a conventional steer tube and stem setup, with the Future Shock, the steer tube is a fixed length, and then the stack height is adjusted by moving the Future Shock up and down and changing the number of spacers. This design means that you can make changes to your stack height without cutting the steer tube, so there's no permanent modifications. The details on the frame are nice. The fit and finish is very high quality, the internal cable routing is well done, and I haven't heard any cable noise inside the frame. There's also some clearance between the brake housing and the head tube. It's annoying when the housing rubs on the frame and wears down the paint, so I was glad to see that it's not an issue here. Speaking of paint protection, the bike came with paint protection film applied from the factory on the down tube and chain stays. It also has a chain guide mounted on the front derailleur to keep the chain from dropping off and tearing up the frame. The frame has all of the latest standards for this type of bike, such as a 12x100 through axle in the front, a 12x142 through axle in the rear, and flat mount disc brake mounts. I do wish that it came with some type of quick release axle, at least on the front wheel. In order to put my bike on my roof rack, I need to keep a 5mm Allen key so that I can get the wheel on and off. The frame and the fork should accommodate 700 by 42mm tires, or you can go as wide as 47mm if you're using 650B wheels. So that's my take on the Specialized Diverge. It's a truly versatile bike that can be used for a really wide variety of riding, and it doesn't really make any compromises to achieve this. I hope you enjoyed the review, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Diverge or this review in the comments below. Thanks for watching.